Welcome to Miles of Books, a book-centric show to listen to on your run. From Another Mother Runner and Feisty Media, I'm host Sarah Bowen Shea, and my smiley co-host today is Ellison Weist. We're going to gab about 4 new books, all of which are set in England.
And that was unintentional.
It wasn't. It didn't occur to me until I was putting our notes together. So hello, Ellison.
Hey there, Sarah.
Okay, we're going to jump right in because, oh my goodness, just love this book so much. Yeah. It is Look What You Made Me Do. And
British cover.
Oh, yeah. Aren't you fancy? Mm-hmm.
No, it was it came out a couple of months ago and I couldn't wait.
Wow. So did you order it from a British?
Blackwell's books in London. They really make it easy for Americans to
look at you.
Order books. Yeah.
All right. So it's by the British author John Lanchester, who is best known for his 2012, can't believe it was that long ago, bestseller called Capital, which was adapted into a streaming series available on BritBox. I really enjoyed Capital, and I adored this new Lanchester novel.
Yeah.
And I was struck by how different the two books are.
Very.
For me, Capital was a slow burn, which Look What You Made Me Do is a true page turner. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it gets you right from the get-go. I'm not giving anything away to say that you meet Kate and Jack, a long married couple. They've probably been married, between 25 and 30 years. And they're getting ready to go out to dinner with friends, and you get to kind of hear some of the little interplay that all longtime married couples have, where you have your inside jokes, your phrases. And like I say, I'm not giving anything away to say later that night, Jack dies very suddenly, has a massive heart attack. And Kate is bereft. She's going through the motions of grieving, and meanwhile, all of her friends, including all of London, are talking about this really crazy new show that's on. I think you would think something like The Sopranos here. It's everybody's talking about it. And Kate really isn't interested, but she happens to be in a book club meeting where there's some talk off to the side, and she hears this phrase. Mm-hmm. And it's a phrase, a very unique phrase that her husband used to say. And suddenly her ears perk up, and she goes home and she watches an episode, and she's horrified because the show is about a longtime married man who's having a very hot, tempestuous affair with a much younger woman. And the whole thing seems to be culled from her life. Mm-hmm. So she is just gobsmacked because she's like, oh my gosh, he must have been having an affair.
Right.
And who is this woman who wrote this show? And from there on,
buckle up.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. Because just when you think you sort of figured something out and you figured out who are the good guys and the bad guys, there's a turn, and then there's another turn, and it keeps going right up to the very end.
So, all right, you know that I love the comparison game that you are so good at playing. So this novel reminded me a lot of Gillian Flynn's work. It's, don't hate me, folks, I found it smarter than that. I mean, Gillian Flynn's books are smart, but this one takes it up a notch or two. But very much that intrigue, that mystery, that kind of world turned upside down of the protagonists, and feels like they've just been slammed against a wall and what's going on here. So I'd love to hear what you compare this novel to, either by writer or by a title.
Well, one thing I would want to jog real quick into is that it is also a commentary on these times. So and Gillian Flynn's work was at that time, and the author that I compare it to, no big surprise, and in fact, I can probably hear some of you yawning out there, Kate Atkinson. I just think that some of her work twists things around, and just when you think you've got a handle, okay, all right, now I see this. I see what she's doing. No, you don't.
And you want to go back and flip back to see scenes that like, oh, what did I miss? That
Right.
sort of thing.
Right. That's what I was like, well, wow, he had that right in the open.
Hmm.
And yet and I read it, but I just filed it off to the side. Yeah. Yeah. And Atkinson does that a lot with her work.
Hmm.
It's sneaky, but it's not sneaky to where you're screaming at the
Yes.
author or throwing the book away in disgust.
Yes, and it's also clever without being conspicuously
Yes.
clever. Yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
it's that's kind of why I see it as so smart that it's
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I got to thinking about this novel. I was probably working out and my mind was drifting and thinking about this along with others we've really enjoyed lately, such as Carol Claire Burke's Yesteryear, which we
Right.
discussed on the last episode, and Meet the Newmans, which was featured in our April 7th episode. And to me, a common theme they all share is the perception of reality and seeing it through the lens of some sort of media, whether it's social media in Yesteryear or television with this novel and Meet the Newmans. So maybe I'm reaching here, but it seems to me that authors are commenting on the current situation we find ourselves.
Oh, I don't think you're reaching at all. I think that's a very smart observation. And I think that the difference here with particularly I feel with Yesteryear and this book is that it's not in a finger wagging way. I think it's very much they engross you, pull you into the book and into the story. And then later on, when it's had time to kind of marinate, that's when you start realizing, wait a minute, this can happen, probably has happened.
Mhm.
I don't think that's overreaching at all.
I also think, well, thank you. And I also think as you get further into each of those novels, your perception of the protagonist
Yes.
changes and you sort of are left thinking, yeah, definitely my feelings fluctuated throughout. Do I feel sympathy for Kate? Do I take umbrage on her behalf? Do I think she's stooping, but lower than she should? It's just
Yes, yes, and yes. Yeah.
so. Dare I say that I think that "Look What You Made Me Do" would be a fabulous book group choice.
You just read you took it out of my mouth, Sarah. How do you do that? No, that's what I think. I think this is something where you'd ask one question at the beginning of the meeting and off you go. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Also because Capital was such a beefy book.
Yes.
And it was definitely over 500 pages, I would wager, or right around that. And this one is just under 300, yet not sparse. It kept me, it was definitely worth the price of admission by a long shot.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, it's time for a brief sponsor break. Stay tuned for talk about 3 new books. This next novel is The Kindness of Strangers by Emma Garman. I confess I'm only about halfway through listening to it because this whole every other week talking about novels.
Catches up with you.
Professor, the homework, there's so much of it.
It's going to look good on your resume. Yeah. Yeah. Now, this one, I'd be interested to hear what you think about listening to it because I wonder how they would do the different voices because you've got this is in 1953 post-war London again. And there's a boarding house run by the rather stern but not unfeeling landlady whose name is Miss Honor. That's what I remember. Yeah. And she already has several long-term tenants and they've all kind of coalesced into a family. And one night there's a knock on the door and this rather down on his heels looking young man is there, says that he's a family friend of Miss Honor's. And although there aren't supposed to be any openings in the house, he's given a room. And what Garman does here is, again, we don't really know exactly what's going on behind the scenes. There are different interpretations, different identities upon different identities of all the people that are in the house. And the other thing that she does right from the get-go is she lets you know that this young man is dead. And he's dying. He's in the middle of the living room. Of course, this is, weeks later. and all of the other occupants of the house are standing over him.
Mhm.
So, of course, the question is, why was he killed? Who killed him? And what were the circumstances that led to it? And so you learn more about each occupant of the house. You also learn about their, in some cases, extremely interesting and intertwined relationships, things they do and don't know about each other.
It's interesting you say voices because now I'm trying to replay it in my head. I don't remember the narrator doing different voices, distinctly different voices so much because a lot of audiobook readers do. And I'm always intrigued by that. And this one didn't strike me that she really does. Maybe
Well, and I think, some people can pull that off. And in fact, I think that is better than I've listened to one recently where I just, as soon as this one particular character's voice came in, I was like, oh, no, don't do that.
give it up.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
So I'm curious if you have a theory about why so many modern day current authors are paying homage to the golden age of mystery novels, which this, I believe, The Kindness of Strangers to me really feels like that. So the Agatha Christie, the Dorothy L. Sayers, those classic whodunits of the 1920s, 30s, and 40s.
I think that there's two things. I think part of it is a nostalgia. Everybody is nostalgic for other days. And I really think if you think about it, that was about 100 years ago. And it seems sometimes in literature, you'll see those cycles.
Oh,
and there's a lot of reissuing of some of the classics. I've been noticing like British mystery authors, he'll say, so and so, and I've never heard of this person. Well, they'll say, we're going to release her first book and see how that takes. The other thing I think is, I think about the 20s and 30s and that era, we'd come out of one world war and there was a lot of unrest, a lot of things going on, not only in our country, but, we had the Depression, but in the world. And enough said. I think
the parallels.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So that's my take on it anyway.
All right. Well, switching to modern day, the London area. It's not quite in London. They don't quite get there. We were both very caught up with this one. It is 5 by Ilona Bannister or Ilana, not sure which. So this is contemporary fiction with much of the action happening in a train station, which is fitting as it is so fast-paced. I mean, it was just boom, off like a shot.
It was, and yet the characterizations, the way that the author does it, where she lets you know right up front, you're in a train station, and in the next 5 minutes, somebody's going to be dead. And yet she, builds it and sits you down with each one of those characters. And I mean, you get a good sit down with them. So it's amazing how she juggles those two, because you're talking about, it's a real, fast-paced thriller. And yet at the same time, it's got this literary twist where you're learning about each person.
Yes. And the backstories and I know you sometimes talk about that if there's, parallel tracks, no pun intended, given that we're in a train station, I'm sorry, of the situation at the train station with that we know the clock is ticking down. She shows the time that is passing, and yet then when you get taken back, instead of being like, no, I want to go back to the train station.
Right.
She so fully builds that world, that backstory, that it almost is good for your blood pressure because you can kind of sink into it. Because otherwise it would just be, you'd be getting the vapors.
Yeah. Right. No. And then at the end, when she starts another chapter and shows you, the timetable, you're like, oh gosh, that's right. And then she throws you back in. But then, talk about how it's written.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I just loved the voice of this novel, which is something that isn't done often or well.
That's exactly right.
And it's second person narration, which Bannister often using you, making the reader an active participant or a character within the narrative. And I want to read a clip from it so that people understand what I'm talking about. And this is very early on. This is page 13. And so that she's talking about this one character and whether he survives and gets to this meeting and how it'd be a shame if he died, because from the very first page, it is a guess who's going to die
Right.
scenario. And so then now I'm quoting. Now, pause here. Take note of their positions. The child, the mother, the businessman, the old woman, and the gambler. Consider these 5 in relation to one another. Consider them in relation to themselves. Leave them here and meet the others, the witnesses to this morning's events. But please don't hang about. We don't have much time. In the middle of the platform stand 2 middle-aged, middle-class, blah, 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 and goes on and, fleshes out the scene. And it just was, again, clever without being clever for the sake of cleverness. It was just, to me, it was a very intriguing way to pull the reader in, to amp up the immediacy of it all. And I really liked it because it was very much a palate cleanser from other novels because it was so strikingly different.
It's very different. Yeah.
In a great way. I know that occasionally the technique bore down a little heavily on you. Is that right?
Yeah, I found that jarring a couple of times, particularly toward the end when things were speeding up. But I do think it was well done. We both read books or magazine articles where it was not well done. But I think this one is probably going to be the thriller of the summer. Even in hardback, I think it's really going to be something that gets passed around and talked about.
Yes, definitely. And it definitely stuck with me. And I found myself being like, okay, when can I sneak back to reading my book?
Your homework.
Shh, don't tell my colleagues, but sometimes I do think, well, it's my job to sit here on the couch during the work time.
Yeah, that's what I tell Carl when he's vacuuming.
Oh my goodness. All right. Well, this is a good spot for a quick break. Stay with us. Our fourth and final novel is A Perfect Hand by Ayelet Waldman, which again takes us back in time. And like in 5, the author speaks directly to the reader, sometimes even doing the classic Dear Reader address.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So tell us a bit about the plot, and I'm curious to hear whether you think she pulled off the conceit of breaking the fourth wall as well as Bannister did.
Okay. I will say, when we talk about Dear Reader, that may give you a hint that this is a Regency set late, I guess more Victorian, Regency to Victorians during Queen Victoria's time. And I love a very good written romance novel about in this period. And what Waldman does is she does pull off the fact that this is essentially almost 2 novels in one, or 2 tracks in one, because first off, there's this young woman, Alice, and she's grown up in a small village. Her mother was in service. She goes into service. But it's always expected that she'll come home and, marry a farm boy. And she has bigger plans for that, especially after she meets a gentleman's dresser. So, in other words, she works for this very sort of snooty, daffy young woman who's on the marriage market and vacillates between being kind to her, but also, I want to change into this. I know I just changed half an hour ago. Anyway, there's a very wealthy but very eccentric gentleman, titled gentleman, who visits this young lady's house, and his dresser is a interesting, good-looking guy named Charlie, and our hero Alice immediately falls for him, and he falls for her. Well, of course, they don't know how they could get married or be together because he's got this unmarried gentleman, a lord, and she's got this unmarried young woman who's on the marriage market. Of course, the only thing to do is try to get those 2 together. And then the 2 servants can live happily ever after together. So then there's a lot of will they, won't they? The Lord is very eccentric, very odd. And he has no interest in the young woman because he thinks she's flighty. She thinks he's good looking, but kind of a idiot. And so they're trying to get them together. And then as the plot continues on, all of a sudden you start meeting some women who have much different outlooks on how a woman should act, how she should be considered in the wide world. And Alice becomes sort of intrigued by this early feminism. And so then, very gently, but Waldman does sort of start shifting the plot, and it doesn't turn out at all like you think when you've read the first 50, 100 pages of the book. Do I think that she accomplished breaking the fourth wall? I have to say that I was a little disconcerted probably by the last couple of chapters. I thought possibly, a lot of times I'll say, man, the editor should have kept 50 to 100 pages of this. In this case, I sort of felt like we needed a little bit more jogging along, that we needed a little bit more information.
Oh, interesting.
Because some of the ending came up, I was sort of like, oh. And maybe not in a, oh, that's interesting, but oh, wow, where did that come from?
It's not supported.
No, no.
Huh. And did you feel this novel was a bit of a Trojan horse, meaning that it seems like it's going to be a cozy novel, meant to be enjoyed over a cup of tea, maybe have some biscuits, yet it also serves up some feminist ideas, which, granted, isn't surprising coming from Waldman, who's a well-known essayist who often focuses on gender politics and other hot-button issues.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, she definitely does. I would say yes, I think it is, although I would still say if you're looking for historical romance that you can curl up on the sofa with, I think if you go into it with your eyes open, realizing it's not going to be a Bridgerton novel, then you'll be fine.
Yeah. So I enjoyed several of Waldman's mommy track mystery novels.
Did I.
Yeah. In the early 2000s. Like, I was really into those.
So was I.
But then for no specific reason, I drifted away from her work. And although she really did kind of lose me on that March 2005 essay that was printed in the Modern Love section of the New York Times.
She lost a lot of people.
Yeah, it was a head scratcher, and people can Google what it is her main premise in that essay was. But that I had drifted away from her before that. And so I was, she's got staying power.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And there's no doubting she's a talented writer. I mean, I think I read a couple or attempted to read a couple of her novels after the mommy track, and this is the first one I was able to finish.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right. Well, good. Well, it was fun traveling to the London environs with you, both past and present, Ellison.
Yeah, you'll notice I didn't go to Ireland this time, or Scotland.
My goodness, although were none of these, no, I think some of these were debut novels.
Oh, yes.
The Kindness of Strangers and is
the Kindness,
5?
No, 5 is not. 5 is her second, but The Kindness of Strangers was.
Okay. All right. But we didn't play it up that it was a debut novel.
No, I kept...
Your other soft spot.
I know.
Ireland, debut novel. Ireland, debut novel.
I feel naked. You're showing all of me.
All right, folks, thanks for listening. Please tell your friends who love to read, including members of your book group, about this podcast. Miles of Books is a production of Another Mother Runner and Feisty Media. For more on Feisty and our other shows, events, workshops, and Feisty Fest happening this September 18 to 20 in Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania, visit feisty.co. That's feisty.co.